Good morning, good morning. Rise, shine, and give God the glory. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to the Good Morning Show. I am your host, Priscilla Mack. And on today's show, we have a wonderful guest coming all the way from the East Coast of Washington, D.C. He has a very thick and wonderful journalism background, and he's also an author. Mr. JOHN Dedakis is going to take us on a ride this morning with some current event information, and he's going to give us some updates about what he has going on in his entrepreneurship nowadays. So, John Dedakis, can you give us a brief background about yourself?
Hi, Priscilla. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to you and your audience. Let's see. Well, I had a 45-year career in journalism and retired about 4 years ago from CNN, where I was one of Wolf Blitzer's editors on the Situation Room. And over the course of my career, I've written 4 mystery suspense thriller novels, and I'm working on the 5th one now. And my novels have sort of a journalism backdrop, and I have a protagonist who is a young woman in her mid-20s trying to figure things out, and she at least begins her career as a journalist.
I thought that was very interesting that you write your books as a man from the perspective of a woman. But how do you connect?
Well, it goes back a long way to when I was working at CNN, and over the course of 25 years there, I worked with many young women in their early to mid-20s who were interns and, new hires, sort of their first career jobs. And I would listen to their stories about their boyfriends and their parents and their careers, and I would, in a sense, internalize a lot of those conversations so that when the time came for me to write fiction, someone suggested that I should write in a way that would stretch me, and I'd never been a woman before, so I thought I'd give it a try, and I discovered that really when you think about it, emotions aren't gender specific. Everybody's got them. It's just that in my experience, women are more, nuanced and articulate about them. So I basically took a lot of the emotions that I'm familiar with as a guy and tried to figure out how that would manifest itself as a woman. And then as I wrote my novels, I would have women read the manuscripts and give me critical feedback on what's working and what's not working.
Wow. So, and I'm sure that they enjoyed the book and they were able to relate to it because it comes from our perspective. And so you've really, put your foot in there and gotten it going. So can you tell us the names of some of these books just so we can find them and where we can find them?
Well, let's see. You can find them on Amazon. That's probably the best place to go to find them. And my last name, and you can probably find them through my last name, which is spelled D as in dog, E, D as in dog, A, K-I-S as in Sam. And the novels, there are 4 of them right now: Fast Track, Bluff, Troubled Water, and the most recent is Bullet in the Chamber. And the 5th novel I'm working on is, the working title is Fake, F-A-K-E, as in fake news. My protagonist, by the time we get to the 4th novel, is a White House correspondent. I covered the White House for the last 3 years of Reagan. So I guess you can see where I'm going with this. In light of the current political environment, I felt that it was important to address the issue of, how reliable is the information you get through the mass media.
Right. And how reliable is it, actually? Some things that are out there, for me, I have to look at least several different articles before determining a truth by, matching up the information. and it also changes over time.
Exactly.
So how does one identify the difference between fake and legitimate news?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think you, to a certain extent, by your own habit, are in a sense answering the question, and that is, you need not decide what the truth is based on just one source. It really is important, I think, for people to read widely and read discerningly and read publications that are reputable. Now, there are definitely differences of opinion in this country, but as I like to say, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And that's what's really troubling right now, because I'll be quite honest with you, I believe we have a president for whom facts don't really matter. He makes them up. And yet the irony is he accuses the legitimate news media of making things up. But that, I can tell you from a 45-year career in journalism, making stuff up is a firing offense. And the people I've worked with are incredibly professional, and that job one is accuracy. And there are plenty of reputable news organizations who rigorously deal with facts and fact-checking. Now, does that mean they don't make mistakes? Of course they make mistakes. Do the individual reporters have a bias sometimes? Yes, because they're human, and it's okay to have opinions. But the professionals are really good at being able to discern in themselves what the difference is between their opinion and just objective factual reporting. So my suggestion to your audience is, in order to be a discerning news consumer, I think it is important, as you do, read a number of different news sources. I would suggest, number one, the Associated Press. It's a wire service. It's been around for over 100 years, even longer. It's just the fact, ma'am, journalism. The New York Times, the Washington Post. There are conservative publications that I think are pretty reputable. The Reuters wire service. There are a number. USA Today, very solid. There are a number of news organizations that have stood the test of time, and you can read them and find out what the facts are, as opposed to just watch and read publications that agree with you, and then you're just sort of in your own bubble. I have friends at Fox News, but I'll be honest, I think that they leave out a lot that undermine their own bias. CNN, I think, and you haven't really asked me to give an impression, but my concern with CNN since I've left is that too much of the coverage is shout fests. You have panels who are, the panels are somewhat balanced, but there's not so much reporting as there is just pontificating from different points of view, and that's kind of unsatisfying, and it's not really journalism; it's more entertainment. MSNBC is, in a sense, the left-wing version of Fox News. It's just as biased as Fox is, only it's biased to the left, and so that is also a news source I don't particularly spend much time watching. So I don't know. That's kind of a long answer, but that I hope your viewers or readers and listeners find helpful.
Yes, I'm going to follow up with that, because I'm going to read what the definition of fake news is. It's a written and published within.
I was going to say, according to whom?
According to the Free Encyclopedia of Wikipedia.
Okay.
Okay. So it says fake news is written and published with the intent to mislead in order to damage an agency, entity, or person, and or gain financially or politically, often with sensationalist, exaggerated, or patently false headlines that grab attention. And it also says, which is intended to humor rather than mislead its audience. It goes on at the bottom to say fake news also undermines serious media coverage and makes it more difficult for journalists to cover significant news stories. And it also talks about how it's clickbait and fabricated. So like we're talking about fake news is available in the 21st century now because we have a lot of online and social media, web and blogging going on. So there's more ways than legitimate, like back in the day, to be able to provide fake news. And it can be a little dangerous, especially if it's clickbait. You don't know if you're clicking on something that's going to lead you to a virus. A clickbait headline is actually not meant to give you a news story, but to advertise to you the advertisements that are within the blog itself. And a lot of times what I notice is that there's a personality that goes along with it, and it's called impulsive. An impulsive person takes the first thing that they see without doing any research about it, and they just run with it. And when you do that, you become a person who is marketing for free on behalf of that agency that is delivering false news. So every individual person has to take upon themselves the responsibility to look around, like you said, at the Associated Press and these different credible reporters to put out the right info, make sure that you're putting out the right information. And a lot of it has to do with our education level. And I'm not just talking about formal education because we see it being distributed by people on all types of social classes, and education levels. So you're having a PhD or a master's or what have you does not determine whether or not you're going to deliver fake news. It's about being self-educated, and that's what we're delivering here today is some information so that you can self-educate yourself on how to determine what's real and what is not.
Exactly. Amen. I couldn't say it any better.
And then you have one thing I read through when a person is delivering the news is opinions over facts. Okay, sometimes we look at someone and they're credible, their dictation is great, the suit and tie looks great, and so we just take it for what it is. Must be true because so-and-so said it. That's not the case. Always when it comes to news and what you're going to put out there, check up on it.
Yes. Yes, there's an axiom in journalism that says, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out.
Yes. That's a first for me. And so some updated current news that we have today is the Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
very sad
sad
incident that occurred.
It is. And, obviously you and I are talking on Monday, and this is being pre-taped, so who knows what will be revealed even in the next 24 hours. But, these kinds of shootings are just happening, it seems, almost all the time now. And, they're politicized, and, everybody begins to weigh in with their particular pet peeve. And at least what's encouraging to me is that at least the coverage I've seen so far, has been responsible and factual, and to a certain extent, there are a number of different facts that are involved that are atypical of a lot of these kinds of things. I think this is sort of the first time when someone has intervened, a citizen has intervened with a gun to shoot back at this guy. The person who did the shooting at the church, as far as I understand, did not have the guns legally. So that doesn't necessarily mean that gun laws, would have prevented this particular thing. It raises the issue of mental health. The guy had a troubled past. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for bolstering our mental health problems, especially returning veterans who've done a number of tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, who come back maybe physically fine but mentally wounded, and is enough being done to really address their situation?
That is correct. And as we talk about this story, I want my listeners to understand what John and I are about to do here is called a dance. We're going to dance. So when it comes to fake news, we're going to dance here. John is going to speak facts, and I am going to come at him as a listener. Okay, so what I'll be speaking is my opinion and my questions. All right.
Ah.
So, that way that they know how. We're going to show them the demonstration right here. We can't just tell you about fake news. We're going to do a whole set right here for you. So,
this is news.
Yeah.
All right, bring it. Bring it, Priscilla.
Always have a wild card. So, dishonorably and mentally unstable and being a military veteran. Every time these situations come up, those are the first things that we look for. And they come out, and it seems to precede the fact that people got killed. And I don't know if that is how they judge a person based upon their mental instability, because, these things are planned out. Like, you have to get up and get dressed, and it's a premeditated murder. Whether you have a mental disorder or not, it is still a premeditated situation. I could understand if you were already out that day and you just flew off of the hinges. But these mentally disordered murders are planned. Okay, and so that's concerning to me about, is the person getting off because of that? And another thing is the access that they have to weapons. And we're here in Texas. I'm going to tell you all this because this is a global show here, so everybody is listening, and you're all from all over the world. I live in Texas, and here in Texas, they love guns. Okay, you go to the gas station, and it's very common to stand there and, with a bag of chips that you're going to purchase, and the person in front of you has a weapon on their hip. Nothing wrong with that. Way out in the open, and that's how it is here. That is the lifestyle that is lived, because in Texas they have it. It's hard for them to let go of. It's not going to be easy to put gun control on folks in Texas. Because it's traditional for them, and it's a strong sports activity. So that's another thing. And then people are, they begin to pressure the governor, Mr. Greg Abbott, about gun control laws. And do you not see that something's wrong with it now? With all of the murders, in fact. But there's a couple of things to take into mind here. I'm not sure if people would discontinue to murder if gun control was applied either. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Yes and no. I mean, this is way beyond my level of expertise. But I think, though, that you can be mentally ill and still commit premeditated murder.
Okay.
I mean, you can be guilty but insane. I mean, that was, in a sense, what John Hinckley was convicted of when he tried to assassinate Reagan. It was premeditated, but the ruling was that he was also mentally ill. And so he was confined to a mental institution, but he was still considered to be guilty and lost his freedom and wasn't able to become in any way free for many, many years after the attempt.
Wow. Okay, and before we got disconnected, I began to talk to the audience about gun control from the perspective of Texas, because I was saying that I live in Texas here. And in this state, they love weapons. They love, and it's for sport. Like I gave a demonstration about how I'll probably go to the gas station right after this, and it's really common to see a man in front of you as you're buying a bag of chips with a weapon on his hip, right on out in the open. And so they also love it for sports, and it's a traditional thing. So it's a little difficult to disconnect them from gun control. And when you're talking to the governor about trying to implement gun control here, there really hasn't been, he never really locked in on whether or not he would follow through with that because he knows where he is.
Maybe help me understand something, because I don't live in Texas, but I know I'd be freaked out to see people, openly carrying a weapon. And so my question is, are you seeing in Texas instances where people get into a heated argument and then pull out their guns and shoot each other? Is that happening more now because that's possible?
I don't know if it's happening more because that's possible, but I have not seen that. I'll just give you an example. I've been at work, and I would want to go to the mall on my lunch break, and they'll say there was just a shooting. And this would be in the afternoon, of course, in broad daylight. So, of course, I'm not going to go there and eat. But I've also, from what I have seen where I am, it's been peaceful carrying. Like they just carry it in the holster on their hip throughout Walmart. It's just walking around normal, like a belt. It's like wearing a belt.
Yeah, my question is why? Why do they feel they need it? Yes, for protection, and you can even argue that, that could very well have made the difference in this particular case. It could have been a much greater massacre, not necessarily at that church because the shooting had already happened, but, at this point, we don't know if the guy had other places where he was going to go and other, planned killings that he was going to do that were stopped because of this citizen. I get that, and that certainly makes sense, but for the most part, do we have vigilantes, armed and, ready to, intervene in situations? Has society gotten that bad that you really need a gun, or is there something else going on psychologically? What's the person afraid of that they feel that they need to carry a weapon around?
That is true. But yeah, it's also true society has gotten bad. That's true too.
Got it.
But
there's plenty of evidence of that. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. But my thing is about the sporting part, and I am a military veteran as well. So we do love weapons, and so how would it work to where if we want to go on the range, we would be able to go on the range. I don't know how they would work it to where it could be solely since we love it so much for sport, that we could be able to operate it for sport as well, as opposed to being completely shut down.
Well, and I don't know if any of the gun control measures are talking about completely shutting anything down. I think it's more of a matter of controlling access, to guns, and the kinds of guns. So, I think that the NRA and some gun owners sort of hysterically overstate the case of what's really at stake here. But on the other hand, my dad was a gun owner. He was a World War II vet. He collected guns. He taught me how to shoot when I was very young, but the most important thing he taught me was gun safety. And I know that is certainly part of what the NRA stands for and what responsible gun owners practice. And yet I think the rhetoric has gotten overheated on probably both sides, because I think that, the Constitution obviously allows for people to have arms. That's not really the issue. But it seems that there needs to be some sort of a concerted effort to understand each other and to find ways of compromising to keep the country safe. I think if you really, take a few steps back and say, what are the concerns here? Do we want a safe society? Do we want, yes, I think everybody does. I think we can agree on that, and then you just try to find ways to take baby steps toward finding common ground where we can agree on the measures that can keep our country and our citizens safe.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I don't have the answers.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I'm just listening. I'm talking, but I'm listening to what the both of us are saying as well. And this sounds like a conversation that needs to be held at a higher degree as well, because what it is a communication conflict. Yeah. Because you are speaking from the point of view of those who, see it that way, and then I'm speaking from the point of view of people who are in Texas, that that's a real reality. They're concerned with when we hear gun control, we hear you're taking from us. You're going to take our weapons away. That's what we hear. Right. And that may not be the case. So it has to be a project in place where they can come together and be able to communicate and have respect for one another, because it needs to be relayed in clear, concise directions of what avenue could be taken for safety, and what does gun control actually mean. Because I can tell you now, when we hear it, we hear you're coming in my house to take my stuff.
Exactly.
And that may not be the case. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And what you're saying is true not just in terms of gun control, but it's also true in terms of our political differences. It's true in terms of our racial differences and the race issues that are emerging more and more. I mean, on any number of issues, the same principle happens. It's like we're lobbing rhetorical artillery shells into each other's camp, hoping that they'll do a lot of damage, but not really caring to understand why the people who we disagree with have the opinions that they do, and trying to reach understanding.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if that were to take place, some things would work, but that has to be something that is implemented into the educational part, because that's not what is taught by the people who are in position of power. They learn how to dictate or make a decision, the charts, all the logistic areas, but not the emotional areas. In order to make, I was talking to a woman about this who was telling me, she was going to tell a guy A, B, and C. And I said, well, that's great. You're giving him a piece of your mind, but is it effective? If it's not going to be effective, then just telling him that doesn't do anything. What you want is for the information that you put out there to make a decision to be effective, so the other person doesn't feel choked up. And if they understand it, they'll be more apt to work with you. So.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And it happens, it can happen. I'm an optimist, but it really has to happen one person at a time. Like we can't change the system. All we can really control is ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, you know what? I think we're going to close it out with that, John Dedakis. And we're going to call this self-control before gun control. How about that?
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it.
Well, thank you so much.